The morning sun rose pale over the sprawling SEAL training compound in Virginia, casting long shadows across the parade grounds and the rows of barracks. Corporal Emily Carter stepped off the transport bus, her boots clicking on the asphalt in perfect rhythm. She pulled her hood low over her head, shielding most of her face from the early morning glare, and felt the curious eyes of the recruits on her back. Whispers followed her like a breeze through dry leaves. She didn't look up. She never did. Emily was new, yes, but she had walked through far worse. She had faced deserts where the wind burned like fire, urban landscapes where the smell of fear clung to every corner, and battles where death whispered her name at every step. But here, in the most elite training program in the country, the scrutiny was different, sharper, subtler. The stakes weren't life and death, at least not yet, but the judgment of her peers was relentless. She had learned long ago that the world liked to size up the quiet ones, only to underestimate them. She adjusted the strap of her pack and kept walking, shoulders straight, boots steady. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the small tattoo peeking from beneath her sleeve. A black skull, its hollow eyes staring directly outward, with a string of coordinates etched beneath it. She had always called it a reminder. Those numbers weren't random. They were the place where she had faced a mission that had changed her forever. The ink wasn't decoration. It was history, survival, and sacrifice rolled into one small permanent mark. A few of the male recruits snickered as they caught sight of it. "Hey, look at Hoodie Girl," one muttered. "Think she's trying to be scary?" Another laughed and elbowed his friend. "Bet that tattoo's fake. Probably got it at a weekend shop downtown." Their laughter was low, but Emily heard it anyway. She kept her head down, her expression unreadable, as if the world's doubts couldn't reach her. The parade ground echoed with commands as instructors drilled the recruits into formation. Emily fell into line, the hood still casting a shadow over her eyes. She noticed the sharp eyes of Commander Marcus Hawley on her. Hawley was a veteran, a man whose face carried the weight of battles no one dared talk about. He observed quietly, leaning against a rail with his arms crossed, scanning each recruit with the precision of a sniper spotting a hidden target. Emily felt the weight of his gaze, but did not flinch. Hawley wasn't impressed, but he wasn't dismissive either. There was curiosity there, buried beneath years of instinct and experience. As the day wore on, Emily's quiet confidence became more noticeable. While the others grumbled and argued, she moved deliberately through drills, never showing frustration, never overcompensating for attention. Her physicality was unremarkable at first glance. She wasn't the fastest runner, the loudest voice, or the one drawing eyes with bravado, but every movement had an almost imperceptible precision. Hawley noticed it immediately. The way she adjusted her stance, the way she handled her gear, the way she breathed while waiting for instructions. Something about her was off balance in the eyes of the recruits, and they didn't know why. During the afternoon marksmanship drill, the recruits lined up behind rifles, eyes squinting down the sights at distant targets. Emily's turn came, and she approached the firing line without hesitation. Hands steady, she set her sights, took a slow breath, and fired. The shot was clean. Dead center. Another shot, equally precise. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She simply reloaded and prepared again. Around her, the other recruits whispered among themselves. "Beginner's luck," someone muttered. But Emily didn't need luck. She never had. Luck was a luxury for those who didn't know discipline, patience, and pain. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the compound in warm oranges and muted reds, Emily walked back to the barracks. The hood remained over her head, but there was a rhythm to her steps, a quiet confidence that demanded notice. A few recruits lingered in the shadows, eyes following her, curiosity mingling with disbelief. They were beginning to sense that there was more to this quiet girl than a hoodie and a tattoo. Commander Hawley watched from the rail, his expression unreadable. He had seen many recruits come and go, some loud and rash, some clever and deceptive. Few commanded his attention merely by walking. Emily Carter had it. He didn't know why yet. He only knew that beneath the muted exterior, something dangerous, something extraordinary, waited. The kind of talent that didn't announce itself with bravado, but revealed itself in silence, precision, and patience. Later that evening, as recruits prepared for lights out, Emily sat alone on the edge of her bunk. She peeled back the hood slightly, tracing a finger over the skull tattoo. The coordinates beneath it whispered secrets of battles fought, friends lost, and the price of survival. She knew what they represented, but no one else did. No one would until they had earned the right to look. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the long nights of preparation, the missions that tested everything she had, and the scars, both seen and unseen, that marked her body and soul. The barracks grew quiet. Laughter from earlier drills faded into distant echoes. Emily's mind wandered briefly to the men and women she had served with before, the chaos of war zones where every shot counted and every decision could mean life or death. Here, the danger wasn't immediate, but the battlefield was different, filled with egos, skepticism, and subtle judgments. She had walked through worse. She could handle this. As lights went out, Commander Hawley made a note in his file, his brow furrowed in thought. There was more to this recruit than met the eye, and he intended to find out what. Emily, meanwhile, pulled the hood snugly over her head again, blending into the shadows of the room. To anyone else, she was just another recruit, a quiet, unassuming presence among a sea of bodies. But Hawley knew better. Danger, skill, and history often hid in plain sight, and he had a feeling this recruit carried all three. Somewhere deep inside, Emily smiled faintly to herself. They laughed at the tattoo. They whispered about the hoodie. Let them. She had already survived worse ridicule, worse doubt, worse judgment. Here, in this compound, she would continue to prove herself not to them, not to Hale, but to the only person who mattered, herself. And when the time came, when the hood came off, when the silence fell, they would remember her. And the SEAL commander, the one who thought he had seen it all, would finally understand why the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The next morning, the sun rose pale and cold over the training grounds, the scent of dew mingling with gunpowder residue from previous drills. Corporal Emily Carter arrived at the mess hall quietly, her hood pulled low as always. Some of the recruits were already seated, voices loud and brash, tossing jokes and glances her way. Hey, look! Hoodie girl actually made it on time, one whispered to his friend, smirking. Wonder if she's got bullets for brains too? The other snorted. The words were meant to wound, but Emily ignored them. She had grown used to this kind of scrutiny. During breakfast, she sat alone at the far corner, peeling her eggs with meticulous care. Around her, the chatter continued. Rumors about her tattoo, speculation about her background, and the usual bravado of men, eager to impress each other. Some recruits made exaggerated gestures, pointing at her sleeve. Hey, think she got that tattoo at a mall tattoo shop? One laughed. Emily didn't flinch. Her hands moved with precision, her posture straight, her eyes scanning the room without revealing emotion. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't insecure. She was invisible, yet impossible to ignore. As the day progressed, the instructors herded the recruits to the obstacle course. The ground was muddy, soaked from an early morning drizzle. Recruits groaned as they climbed ropes, crawled under nets, and sprinted across logs slick with rain. Some of the more boisterous men exchanged whispers about Emily. Bet she be last, one muttered. Another laughed. I've seen her stumble already. This is going to be entertaining. Emily didn't stumble. Every rope she climbed, every log she balanced on, every mud-soaked crawl she endured, she did with deliberate precision. Her movements were economical, yet fluid, smooth, yet powerful. The men who had mocked her were forced to follow her pace. Their laughter turned into reluctant silence. Her quiet competence was a mirror held up to their insecurities, and it unnerved them. She wasn't trying to show off, wasn't competing with them. She was simply herself, and herself was enough. Commander Marcus Hawley observed from the edge of the course, his arms crossed, eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't interfere, but he noticed details the others missed. The controlled way Emily breathed while climbing. The subtle adjustments she made to maintain balance. The instinctive way she rolled after minor slips to avoid injury. He had seen hundreds of recruits, but Emily's movements carried a discipline and precision that suggested experience far beyond what her paperwork claimed. The blacked-out sections of her record suddenly felt like gaps in a story he was desperate to read. The ridicule persisted in quieter, more insidious ways. In the mess hall later, some recruits deliberately dropped utensils near her or nudged her shoulder as she passed, smirking under their breath. Emily ignored them. She had learned long ago that attention, both positive and negative, could be weaponized, and she preferred to stay in the shadows until the moment demanded visibility. She didn't need to fight. Her skills spoke for themselves, even if the others weren't ready to listen. During a mid-morning firearms drill, the tension in the air thickened. Hawley assigned each recruit a target at a moderate distance. The men took turns firing, some steady, some jittery. When Emily's turn came, she approached the line with slow, measured steps. Her fingers moved over the rifle with the kind of familiarity that suggested she had spent thousands of hours in situations where a single miscalculation could mean death. She raised the rifle, exhaled slowly, and fired. The bullet struck dead center. The next shot, equally precise. Again and again, each round landing exactly where she intended. The other recruits whispered, incredulous. "Beginner's luck," one muttered, trying to cover his shock with sarcasm. Emily didn't respond. She reloaded silently, checked her sights, and fired again, calm and unshakable. Hale's eyes narrowed. This wasn't beginner's luck. This was controlled, disciplined, trained instinct. Every movement screamed experience the instructors hadn't expected from someone so quiet, so understated, and so young-looking. During a break, a group of recruits cornered her near the lockers. "Hey, Skullgirl," one taunted, gesturing toward her tattoo. "You hiding some secrets under that hood? Or is it just all smoke and mirrors?" Another laughed. "Yeah, maybe you just look scary to hide the fact you're terrible." Emily's eyes met theirs, calm but unwavering. She didn't need words. Her presence alone silenced them. Her stillness carried weight. One by one, the men shuffled away, suddenly unsure, suddenly aware that the quiet girl they had mocked might be something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Hale's curiosity grew with every interaction. That afternoon, he called Emily aside for a routine check of her file. In the dim light of his office, he skimmed through the redacted sections. Most of her record was hidden, marked classified. There were references to missions in Mosul, Iraq, dates and locations blacked out, mentions of specialized reconnaissance work. Hale's brow furrowed. Something in the way the information was concealed suggested she had been involved in operations most people in the military didn't even know existed. The thought of what she had endured and survived made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Meanwhile, Emily walked back to the barracks, hood pulled low, expression neutral. She could feel the eyes on her again, heavy with curiosity and confusion. But she ignored them. The ridicule, the jokes, the whispers, none of it mattered. She had faced worse. She had stared down death in war zones where every heartbeat counted, where every shot carried life or death consequences. Here, the battlefield was different, but the principle remained: focus, patience, control. And Emily had mastered all three. That night, as the barracks quieted and lights flickered off one by one, Emily sat on the edge of her bunk. She traced a finger over the skull tattoo and the coordinates beneath it, her mind drifting briefly to faraway rooftops, shattered streets, and missions that had changed everything. Those coordinates were not just ink, they were survival, memory, and a promise she had made to herself: to endure, to excel, to remain unseen until her skills were needed most. Outside, Hale made his rounds, stopping briefly near her room. From the shadows, he observed her silently. The other recruits were sleeping, oblivious, but he sensed that Emily was different. She carried history in her posture, in her gaze, in the quiet way she breathed. Hale had learned long ago not to underestimate anyone, but even he found himself curious, cautious, and in some unspoken way, unsettled. The laughter of the recruits earlier that day, the mockery, the subtle taunts, they had failed. Emily had turned invisibility into a weapon. She hadn't retaliated, hadn't sought attention, but the effect was undeniable. Curiosity, respect, and a faint trace of fear began to replace ridicule. Those who mocked her had glimpsed, however fleetingly, the depth of experience and competence that hid behind the hood. And so, the first day of Emily Carter's return to the military ended quietly, almost invisibly, but with a weight that would not be forgotten. In the darkness of the barracks, the hum of distant machinery and the muted chatter of sleeping recruits surrounded her. Hale left her to her thoughts, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the quietest person in the room was, without question, the most dangerous and the most extraordinary of them all. She closed her eyes, hood still over her head, and let the silence envelop her. They laughed at the tattoo, whispered about the hoodie, and dismissed her. Let them. They hadn't seen anything yet. The real test, the real revelation, was still to come, and when it arrived, the SEAL commander himself would finally understand why some people, unseen and underestimated, carry the weight of legends in their hands. The sun barely breached the horizon when the unit assembled for a joint exercise with the Marine sniper team. Mist clung to the forest edges, curling between the trees like ghostly fingers, as if the woods themselves sensed the tension building. Commander Marcus Hawley briefed the group with the usual stern authority, outlining the long-range precision challenge. Targets hidden across dense woodland, each one to be neutralized without error. It was a test designed for seasoned marksmen, and every SEAL knew the stakes were high. Emily Carter listened silently, hood pulled low as always. Around her, the other recruits muttered and whispered. Some laughed under their breath, expecting her to fail miserably. They're really going to let her do this? One asked, disbelief coating his words. Hoodie girl doesn't even seem like she's ever touched a real sniper rifle. Another nodded, smirking. I'm placing my bets. She won't even hit the closest target. Their jokes were meant to cut, to demean, but Emily didn't flinch. She had faced ridicule in far worse circumstances, in places where bullets and explosions mattered more than petty ego. Hale didn't respond to their chatter. His eyes were fixed on Emily, assessing her as he always did. There was something about her posture, the subtle way she held her rifle during drills, the quiet calculation in her gaze, that suggested she might not be as ordinary as they believed. But even Hale didn't yet know the truth. Not the full story. Not the legend hidden beneath the hoodie. The drill began. The first Marine sniper took position, adjusting his scope carefully. The others followed in sequence, checking wind direction, distance, and trajectory. Emily's turn approached, and murmurs rippled through the SEAL recruits. She doesn't have a chance, one whispered again. Don't blink. This'll be funny. Emily, however, moved forward with slow, deliberate steps, her hood still low, her rifle steady in her hands. She found her perch on a fallen log, a slight rise in the forest floor giving her a clear line of sight. Her breathing slowed, controlled, each inhale measured. Her finger traced the trigger lightly, checking the mechanics of the rifle, the weight of it in her hands. Around her, chaos, the nervous shuffling, the occasional clink of equipment, the low muttering of recruits seemed distant, almost irrelevant. She focused solely on the targets, 29 in total, scattered across the terrain, some partially obscured by trees, others barely visible beyond natural cover. The first shot left her barrel with a soft, precise report. Dead center. A faint puff of leaves announced the impact, barely noticeable to anyone not looking. The second shot followed, the third, the fourth, each one landing perfectly. Whispers grew quiet. Some recruits craned their necks to see, eyes widening with disbelief. Hale's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He had seen hundreds of snipers in action, but the precision here was unnerving. Emily wasn't performing. She was teaching a silent, deadly lesson in mastery. Time seemed to stretch. One by one, she neutralized every target. Each shot was calculated, intentional, and flawless. The forest, which had been alive with chatter moments ago, seemed to hold its breath. By the time she finished, all 29 targets had been hit exactly as intended, each in the center of its mark. No misses, no errors. A few Marine snipers exchanged glances, stunned. One whispered, almost audibly, "How?" Hale walked slowly toward her, his expression unreadable. The other recruits stared at Emily, suddenly quiet, their earlier mockery replaced by a mix of awe, disbelief, and nervous respect. Some tried to rationalize it. "Maybe it's just luck," one muttered. "It can't happen twice." But Hale shook his head minutely. This was no fluke. He could feel it in the way she moved, the way she calculated wind and distance, the subtle adjustments she made instinctively. She was a trained sniper, a professional, and she had been underestimated by everyone. After the exercise, the recruits gathered for the debrief. Emily stood quietly at the back, hood still drawn low. The Marine instructor approached her, shaking his head in amazement. You're extraordinary," he said softly. "Where did you get your training?" Emily didn't respond immediately. She adjusted the rifle, checking the sights as if nothing had happened. "I learned from experience," she said finally, her voice calm, almost matter-of-fact. "Nothing in books can teach this. You learn it where mistakes cost lives." The other SEALs remained silent. For the first time, they weren't sure how to treat her. The humor, the derision, the casual dismissal, it had vanished in the shadow of her skill. One of the older recruits, who had been one of the loudest critics, swallowed hard and muttered, I didn't know anyone could do that." Emily's eyes lifted briefly, meeting his gaze. No anger, no gloating, just calm, uncheckable certainty. She didn't need to prove herself to them. The work spoke for her. Hale's mind, however, was racing. Something about her movements, the precision of her shots, the quiet confidence, it all matched descriptions he had read in files he had only glimpsed, never fully understood. The blacked-out sections of her record, the redacted missions, the rare commendations he had seen in passing, everything suddenly fit a pattern. This was no ordinary recruit. And the thought chilled him slightly. She had been underestimated, not just by her peers, but by the entire system that should have recognized her years ago. Later, as the group returned to the compound, Emily carried her rifle carefully, movements fluid despite fatigue. The other recruits, once brash and knocking, kept a respectful distance. Some couldn't look her in the eyes. She didn't smile, didn't boast, didn't demand acknowledgement. She walked with quiet dignity, as though the day had been routine, as though she had done nothing extraordinary. Hale followed her silently, noting the subtle ways she carried herself, the calm precision in every step. There was no arrogance, no need to flaunt skill, only quiet mastery. He realized finally why she had remained hooded, why she had kept her tattoo hidden, why she had endured mockery without a word. She had been through far worse. She had survived situations that would break most people. And now here, in a training exercise, she had reminded everyone that true mastery never announces itself. It waits, silent, until the moment that demands it. As evening descended, Emily returned to the barracks, hood drawn low over her head. The whispers that had followed her since arrival had turned to tentative curiosity. Some of the recruits stared, some avoided eye contact entirely. Hale remained at the edge of the compound, watching her disappear into the building. He made a quiet note to himself. This was only the beginning. The real challenge, the real revelation, had yet to come. And somewhere deep in her mind, Emily allowed herself the slightest smile. They had laughed at her when she arrived. They had whispered and mocked. But she had already won the first round of silent victories. The hood, the tattoo, the quiet demeanor, it was all part of the strategy. And when the moment came to reveal everything, everyone, even Commander Howell, would finally understand the truth behind the girl they had underestimated. The debrief room was silent, the tension almost palpable. The recruits, still reeling from the morning's sniper exercise, avoided eye contact with one another. They had expected chaos, missed shots, maybe even embarrassment, but what they witnessed was something entirely different. Perfection. Every target had been neutralized, each bullet dead center. Whispers of disbelief floated in the air, but no one dared speak loudly. Commander Marcus Hale stepped forward, his eyes, cold and analytical, fixed on Emily Carter. She sat quietly at the edge of the room, her hood drawn low, her posture calm, almost meditative. The others shuffled nervously, sensing that something important was about to happen. Hale's voice cut through the silence, precise and commanding. "Carter, remove the hood." A ripple of nervous murmurs spread through the recruits. "Why now?" One whispered. Another muttered, "What's he seeing?" Emily didn't flinch. She paused briefly, hands resting on her knees, then slowly reached up and pulled the hood back. The room seemed to exhale, or maybe hold its breath simultaneously. Her head was shaved close, exposing the sharp angles of her skull. A scar traced a thin line across her temple, subtle but unmistakable, a souvenir from a past that most of the room could only imagine. But it was the tattoo on her neck that stopped everyone. The black ink stretched from just below her ear down to her collarbone. A skull, eyes hollow and piercing, with a set of coordinates etched beneath it. It wasn't a decorative piece, a gimmick, or a cliché symbol of toughness. This was a mark of history, survival, and experience. Whispers died instantly. The room, once alive with laughter and casual arrogance, was now suffused with disbelief and awe. Hale's jaw tightened. His hand moved almost unconsciously toward the edge of his chair as he leaned forward. The tattoo was unmistakable. He had seen it before, fleetingly, in files that were classified, nearly forgotten in the fog of past operations. This wasn't just a recruit with a skill set. This was someone who had lived through situations that few could survive. He felt a chill, an uncomfortable recognition, as his mind began to piece together fragments of memory and information. "Emily Carter," he said finally, his voice low and controlled, I didn't expect this." She looked at him, calm and steady, as though the silence, the tension, the weight of his gaze were entirely familiar. "I'm not here to impress anyone, sir," she said quietly, her tone carrying a subtle authority. "I've done enough to know that skill speaks for itself. Recognition is secondary. The other recruits stared, jaws slack, suddenly aware that the person they had mocked, whispered about, and underestimated was someone entirely different from what they imagined. One of the Marines muttered under his breath, "She? She's the one." Another shook his head, trying to process the shock. Impossible. Hale's mind raced back to Mosul, Iraq, 2017. He remembered the chaos. Buildings reduced to rubble, gunfire echoing off walls, civilians trapped, and a mission gone wrong. The files he had seen years ago, redacted almost entirely, mentioned a female sniper, call sign Ghost Lynx, responsible for a miraculous long-distance shot that saved dozens of lives. The record had been fragmented, incomplete, classified beyond explanation. And now, standing before him, hood removed, Emily Carter bore every mark of that mission. The tattoo, the scar, the calm precision, it all fit. She was the legend made real. The room remained silent for several long moments. Hale exhaled slowly, a mixture of awe and disbelief washing over him. He realized, with sudden gravity, that the recruit he had underestimated, whom he had assumed was inexperienced, perhaps even incapable, was someone who had once held the lives of dozens of soldiers and civilians in her hands. Someone who had acted when no one else could. Someone who had saved him, indirectly, without either of them ever knowing. Emily's eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of each recruit in turn. No gloating, no arrogance, only clarity and calm. "I don't need applause," she said. "I've never needed it. What matters is the mission, the team, and the job that must be done." She adjusted her uniform slightly, the air of authority unmistakable. For the first time, her peers understood. The quiet girl, the one with the hoodie and tattoo, had already proven herself beyond measure. Hale's mind turned back to the morning's exercise. The precision, the composure, the absolute control, it made sense now. She wasn't new to this. She had honed her craft in conditions far more hostile than any training compound could replicate. She had learned to survive, to calculate, to act decisively when lives depended on it. The realization left him speechless. For once, the SEAL commander had no words. He could only watch, silently, as Emily removed the last barrier between herself and the team. A young recruit finally broke the silence. I didn't know," he whispered. Another nodded slowly, realization dawning. "I didn't think anyone could be like that." The words were hesitant, almost reverent. Emily didn't respond. She simply stood, her posture relaxed, yet commanding, and walked toward the exit of the room. Every step seemed measured, precise, purposeful. She was not just a recruit anymore, she was a presence, undeniable and impossible to ignore. Hale followed, not beside her but a few steps behind, still processing the implications. He realized that she had come to this unit, not for recognition, not for praise, but for purpose. The mockery, the jokes, the whispers, they had never mattered. And yet, in a strange way, they had set the stage for a revelation that no one would forget. Those who had laughed, those who had doubted, were now witnesses to a truth that could not be ignored. Emily returned to her bunk, hood once again resting lightly on her shoulders. The others watched her silently, some in awe, some in disbelief. Hale made a quiet note in his mind. This was only the beginning. The real story, the past that shaped her, the missions that tested her, and the skill that defined her had yet to unfold fully. In the quiet of the evening, as the last recruits settled and lights dimmed, Emily traced her tattoo again, the skull and coordinates a silent testament to survival and courage. The room had witnessed a small fragment of her story, but the full weight of it was reserved for the moments when it mattered most. And Hale, a man who had seen too much, realized that he was in the presence of someone extraordinary, someone who had lived and fought in a way few could comprehend. And yet, here she was, quietly returning to the ranks, unassuming, hidden in plain sight. They had laughed at the tattoo. They had dismissed the hood. And now they understood too late for mockery, just in time for respect. The SEAL commander, hardened by years of battle, stood silent, humbled by the quiet force that had revealed herself. In that silence, Emily Carter had won the first battle of perception, and the legend behind the tattoo had begun to take shape. Mosul, 2017. The city lay in ruins, a labyrinth of shattered concrete, twisted metal, and smoke curling from burning buildings. The streets were silent, except for the occasional echo of distant gunfire and the low hum of engines carrying militia forces through crumbling alleyways. Emily Carter, then Staff Sergeant Carter, crouched behind a half-destroyed wall, her sniper rifle pressed firmly to her shoulder. Her eyes scanned the horizon, every twitch of her finger calibrated, every breath measured. One wrong move and dozens of lives, including her own, would be lost. Her team, a small Marine recon squad, had been tasked with a hostage rescue mission. Intelligence indicated that a group of civilians had been taken by a rogue militia faction. They were hiding somewhere deep in Mosul's northern district, surrounded by insurgents who would kill anyone who approached. What had started as a routine extraction had spiraled into chaos. The streets, which should have been quiet, were alive with enemy patrols. Explosions shattered windows and sent dust into the already thick air. Emily's teammates moved cautiously, relying on her eyes, her instincts. She was their sniper, their guardian angel from a distance. Her scope captured more than targets. It captured the flow of battle, the rhythm of enemy movements, the patterns that could mean life or death. Hours had passed since they were pinned down, the squad pinned behind walls and barricades, unable to advance without being cut down. The militia had superior numbers, and reinforcements were closing in. Emily's status, whispered her team leader, a seasoned Marine whose calm exterior belied his tension. Targets in sight, she replied softly, scanning the ruined cityscape through her scope. Distance 2.1 miles. One clear shot. Her voice was quiet, but it carried authority. A 2.1-mile shot. The odds were nearly impossible. No sniper should be able to make a clean hit at that distance, not in the chaos of urban combat with wind gusts, shifting cover, and unpredictable enemy movement. But Emily was not ordinary. She had trained for years in environments that pushed precision beyond human limits. She had survived conditions that would have broken most seasoned soldiers. And now, her team's lives depended on her skill, her patience, and her courage. The first target appeared, a militia sniper perched on a rooftop, scanning for movement. Emily exhaled slowly, compensating for the slight crosswind, the uneven angle, and the distance that made even the most advanced calculations a gamble. She adjusted her scope minutely, finger poised lightly on the trigger. Time seemed to slow. Around her, the squad held their breath, knowing this shot could determine whether they survived or became casualties themselves. One shot, the target dropped. Emily didn't allow herself relief. There were more. Each shot that followed required precision, timing, and nerve. She calculated, she aimed, she fired. Bullets struck exactly where intended. Hostage safety was paramount. Enemy positions were neutralized. The line between life and death was narrow, razor-sharp, and she walked it with calm expertise. Minutes felt like hours as the squad advanced, covering each other with automatic fire, grenades clearing barricades, and Emily providing overwatch from a hidden perch. The militia had no idea who was picking them off. No idea that a single woman, unseen and underestimated, was orchestrating their downfall from a distance. Her team moved closer to the hostages, guided by the lethal precision of every shot she took. Then came the most critical moment. A group of insurgents appeared, weapons raised, preparing to fire on the civilians. The window for intervention was fleeting. Emily adjusted her scope, recalculated, and fired. One shot, another. Each bullet struck with lethal accuracy. The insurgents fell, some unaware even of who had fired the shots that sealed their fate. The civilians were safe, guided into cover by the remaining Marines. Her team's leader looked up through his binoculars, disbelief and relief in equal measure. Carter, that was impossible. Emily simply nodded, her gaze steady. Mission first, she said, almost dismissively. Always mission first. When the team finally regrouped at the extraction point, the toll of the mission was clear. 2 Marines had been injured. The rest were shaken but alive. Emily, despite her role as sniper and protector, bore the scars of the encounter herself, a graze to the temple, minor burns from an explosion nearby, and fatigue etched deeply into her expression. Her body was a map of survival, her mind a repository of calculations and split-second decisions. Every line of her tattoo, every coordinate etched into her skin, was a reminder of this mission, of that moment where the impossible became reality. Later, during the debrief and after-action reports, Emily's contribution was almost lost in the bureaucracy of classified operations. The official commendation was vague, heavily redacted, barely hinting at the life-saving shots she had taken. But those who had witnessed her in action, her team, the hostages, the Marines, knew the truth. She had been the line between survival and catastrophe, the unseen hand guiding chaos into order. And she had done it silently, without demand for recognition, without desire for praise. She carried more than skill in those moments. She carried memory. Every life saved, every shot taken, was a weight she bore alone. The coordinates beneath her skull tattoo marked the location where she had made the impossible shot, the point where her team could live because she had acted decisively when no one else could. The ink was more than art. It was a ledger of courage, a permanent memorial to a day when survival hinged on one person's calm, lethal precision. After the mission, Emily chose to leave active combat quietly. She had survived where others hadn't. She had been tested in fire and found unbreakable. But the world of war had demanded more than her youth could sustain. She returned home, carrying her experiences, her scars, and her reputation hidden beneath a hood and a quiet demeanor. Only now, years later, had she returned to training, returning not for glory, not for recognition, but to continue serving, to pass on the lessons of precision, patience, and survival. Back at the SEAL compound, in the present, Hale's realization deepened. He had seen the controlled movements, the flawless execution during the exercise, the calm in the face of ridicule. But now he understood why. Emily Carter was not a new recruit in the conventional sense. She was a veteran of war, a sniper whose skill had saved lives in a city far from Virginia, a soldier whose actions had defined heroism in a way few would ever comprehend. And the recruits who had once laughed at the tattoo, mocked the hoodie, or doubted her abilities, they had no idea what they were witnessing. They were in the presence of a living legend, a ghost from past missions, returning to the ranks not for acknowledgement, but for purpose. As evening fell over the SEAL compound, Emily traced the skull tattoo on her neck once again, the coordinates beneath it faint in the dim light. She didn't need anyone to understand. She had done what was necessary when it mattered most. And Hale, observing silently, realized that he was witnessing the quiet introduction of a warrior whose past was as lethal and precise as her present. The legend of the tattoo had only just begun. The next morning, the SEAL compound buzzed with activity, but the atmosphere had shifted. Emily Carter's presence now carried a weight that no one dared ignore. The whispers that had once followed her, mockery, jokes, disbelief had turned into cautious curiosity. Even the toughest, most brash recruits approached drills with a careful awareness, glancing at her occasionally, hesitant to provoke her or test her limits. Something in the air had changed, something unspoken yet unmistakable. Emily was no ordinary recruit. Commander Marcus High watched silently from the edge of the training field, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on her movements. His mind replayed the events of the past 2 days, the flawless sniper exercise, the morning drills, the reveal of the tattoo and hood, and now the memories of Mosul, pieced together like fragments of a puzzle. Every movement she made, every calculated pause, carried the echoes of experience that Halle had only seen in the rarest, most elite operators. He remembered that day vividly. Mosul, chaos, bullets, and death. The precise, impossible shot that had saved countless lives. The woman before him had been the ghost behind that miracle, and now, years later, she moved among his recruits with the same calm mastery. Hale's jaw tightened. He had encountered many legends, but few had the quiet assurance of someone who had stared down death and survived, and still chose to serve. Emily Carter was that person. Hale's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the obstacle course. Some of the recruits, emboldened by curiosity, had been attempting to test her indirectly. One of the younger Marines challenged her to a climbing exercise, boasting loudly, "Bet you can't beat me to the top, Skullgirl." The words, intended as a joke, carried an edge of defiance. Emily didn't react immediately. She measured him with a glance that conveyed nothing but focus. Then she moved, every motion fluid, precise, controlled. She scaled the rope, balanced across beams, and maneuvered through the obstacles with a quiet efficiency that left the onlookers speechless. By the time she finished, the young recruit was still struggling halfway up the course, panting, red-faced, and utterly defeated. A stunned silence replaced laughter. The lesson was clear. Skill didn't need noise, arrogance didn't equate to ability, and experience, though hidden, commanded respect. Hale's gaze lingered on Emily as she moved to the side, calm, composed, seemingly indifferent to the awe she inspired. He finally approached, his own pace deliberate, mirroring the respect he felt in that moment. "Carter," he said quietly, so that only she could hear, "Do you even realize what you've done here?" Emily turned her head slightly, hood resting lightly on her shoulders, eyes steady and calm. "Sir?" she asked softly. Hale's voice lowered further, almost a murmur. "The shot in Mosul. The exercise this morning. Everything you've done. You're not just a recruit. You're a force no one here is prepared to understand yet." Emily's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "I never sought to be understood," she said. "I only seek to complete the mission, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to endure what must be endured." Her voice was quiet, but each word carried weight, precision, and authority. Halle felt the truth of it resonate in his chest. Around them, the recruits had noticed the exchange. They whispered in hushed tones, watching the commanding officer, a man hardened by years of combat and accustomed to controlling situations, speak in awe and respect to someone half his size. Slowly, the realization sank in. The woman they had underestimated, mocked, and whispered about was someone extraordinary. One of the more experienced SEALs approached Halle hesitantly, nodding toward Emily. "Sir, she's incredible. I don't think anyone has seen anything like it." Halle didn't respond immediately. He studied her again, the calm authority in her posture, the quiet mastery of her movements, the hint of scars beneath her sleeves and uniform. He thought about the men she had saved, the missions completed in shadows, the impossible calculations made under pressure, and the burden she carried without complaint. Halle realized, finally, that Emily's presence elevated the entire unit. She was a force multiplier, someone who could turn chaos into order without noise or theatrics. The day continued with rigorous exercises, but the dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Emily moved among the recruits, participating when necessary, observing when strategic, teaching subtly when an opportunity presented itself. The other SEALs began to notice small things: how she adjusted her stance while aiming, how she predicted wind shifts, how she calculated distance instinctively. Even minor movements, imperceptible to most, revealed her experience. Whispers of mockery were replaced by questions, admiration, and sometimes quiet fear. Halle watched carefully, noting every detail. Emily wasn't just skilled. She was disciplined in a way few soldiers ever achieved. She carried herself with humility, never flaunting ability, never seeking recognition, yet commanding respect effortlessly. Hale's mind went back to Mosul again. The impossible 2.1-mile shot, the lives saved, the chaos endured. Everything he had seen her do here made sense now. She wasn't performing for him, or for the recruits. She was simply being herself, the same lethal, precise, and disciplined soldier who had survived in war zones when most would have fallen. As evening fell, Halle called the recruits together for a briefing. His tone was different, now less formal, more reflective, carrying an unspoken acknowledgement of Emily's presence in history. "Carter," he began, addressing her directly, "you've demonstrated skill, patience, and precision that is extraordinary. Not just today, but in everything I've observed since you arrived. Your experience is unmatched, and your actions set a standard that others can only aspire to reach." Emily inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the compliment without pride or vanity. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I only do what must be done. The mission comes first, always." The recruits absorbed the exchange in silence. Some nodded subtly, others stared wide-eyed, processing the shift in their understanding. The mockery, the jokes, the whispers, they had been silenced. What they had underestimated was not just skill, but history, experience, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Later, as Halle watched Emily leave the briefing room, he reflected on what he had learned. She had faced situations he could barely imagine, executed missions with precision few could achieve, and carried scars physical and emotional that were invisible but potent. Yet she had returned, quietly, to continue serving, not for recognition or praise, but because she understood the value of purpose. Halle realized something profound. Emily Carter had redefined what it meant to be a soldier in the room. She had earned respect not through words, but through actions and history. And those who had laughed at her, who had mocked her tattoo, would never forget the lesson she had delivered silently: mastery, experience, and courage are more powerful than arrogance, noise, or mockery. As night fell over the compound, Emily sat alone in the dim light of the barracks. The hood rested lightly on her shoulders, and her eyes were calm, reflective. She traced the tattoo on her neck absent-mindedly, remembering Mosul, the lives saved, the decisions made in the chaos of war. She had survived. She had endured. And she had returned to a new battlefield, a battlefield of perception, respect, and quiet authority. Commander Howell, observing from the shadows, understood finally why the quiet ones were often the most dangerous. Emily Carter was not merely a recruit. She was a soldier forged in fire, tempered by experience and defined by precision. She had carried the weight of impossible choices, and now she carried it among them, silent but unmistakable. The realization left him speechless, awed and quietly, irrevocably respectful. And for the first time since she had arrived, the SEAL commander was silent, not in judgment, not in command, but in recognition of the quiet force who had revealed herself. The morning was heavy with tension, the early fog curling around the edges of the SEAL compound like silent sentinels. Today was not training. Today was real. Intelligence had flagged a high-value target, a rogue arms dealer coordinating operations across multiple states. The operation was delicate, requiring stealth, precision, and absolute coordination. The team had trained for weeks, yet even the most seasoned operators felt the familiar tension of an impending mission. Emily Carter, now fully recognized for her past exploits and exceptional skill, moved among the team with quiet authority. The recruits who had once whispered and mocked now followed her lead, watching her carefully. She inspected weapons, adjusted optics, and offered subtle guidance where needed. Her presence was calm but commanding, and every movement conveyed assurance. The SEALs understood one thing clearly. When Emily Carter took point, the mission's success was significantly more likely. Commander Hall briefed the team, his voice steady but underscored with urgency. Intel confirms the target will be moving through a warehouse district in exactly 30 minutes. He's armed, highly dangerous, and surrounded by a small team of guards. Your objective: apprehend him without civilian casualties. Extraction will be immediate. Everyone has a role. Follow protocol. Trust your training. And remember, the team moves as one. Emily listened silently, absorbing every detail. She had seen similar situations in Mosul, in locations far more chaotic and unpredictable. The patterns of human movement under stress, the predictable hesitations, the instinctive reactions of trained soldiers versus untrained men. It was all familiar. She didn't need to speak to convey strategy. Her eyes, subtle nods, and precise movements were enough for those who had learned to watch closely. The team moved out, vehicles silent, engines muffled, tires gripping wet asphalt as they navigated the urban streets. Emily remained calm, checking angles, confirming lines of sight, and mentally mapping every possible threat scenario. Hawley observed her from the rear, noting her methodical approach. Unlike others, she didn't rush, didn't panic, and didn't second-guess. Her experience allowed her to anticipate events before they occurred to quality. That could mean the difference between success and disaster. They arrived at the warehouse district, the air thick with fog and tension. Emily signaled silently, positioning herself on a high vantage point overlooking the primary entryway. The rifle was ready, scope aligned, finger light on the trigger. Below, the target's convoy moved slowly, unaware of the precision watchtower above them. Halle glanced at her, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The team was ready because she had prepared them, observed the environment, and predicted the enemy's every move. The operation began with quiet efficiency. SEALs infiltrated the area, neutralizing sentries with precision and moving in synchrony. Emily observed from above, picking off threats at the precise moment necessary to protect her team and minimize exposure. Each shot was deliberate, intentional, and flawless. The sound of suppressed gunfire echoed faintly in the fog, a symphony of control amidst chaos. Suddenly, a guard turned unexpectedly, moving faster than anticipated toward one of the advancing SEALs. Emily's eyes narrowed. She exhaled, adjusted for distance and wind, and fired. The guard dropped silently, the team unaware of the intervention, until they reached the location moments later. A murmured "thank you" passed between teammates, but Emily offered no acknowledgement. This was expected. This was mission. The success of the team mattered more than recognition. Inside the warehouse, the target had realized something was amiss. He barked orders to his men, attempting to coordinate a retreat. Emily adjusted her scope, tracking every movement with the precision of a predator. Her knowledge of human behavior, honed through years of battlefield experience, allowed her to predict actions before they occurred. She signaled subtly to Holly, who understood immediately. The SEALs moved in, surrounding the building, every team member guided by the silent authority of the sniper above. Time slowed in those critical moments. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement carried weight. The target attempted to escape through a rear exit, but Emily anticipated the maneuver. She fired a warning shot, not to harm, but to direct. The bullet struck a nearby support beam with a sharp report, startling the target into compliance. The SEALs moved in, subduing him without unnecessary violence. Civilians in nearby buildings remained unharmed. Once the target was secured, Haile signaled extraction. Emily descended from her perch, moving toward the team with calm efficiency. No one spoke unnecessarily. The operation had been flawless, yet the sense of awe among the recruits was palpable. They had witnessed precision, skill, and authority in action, and the silent force behind it, Emily Carter, was now undeniable. During debrief back at the compound, Halle addressed the team. Today, we accomplished the mission with minimal risk to civilians and zero casualties to our team. That success is due in large part to the coordination, skill, and foresight demonstrated by every member, but particularly by Carter. Her ability to anticipate threats and control the battlefield from a distance ensured our safety and the operation's success. Emily remained quiet, Hood lightly resting on her shoulders, acknowledging the praise with a subtle nod. She had no need for accolades. She had fulfilled the mission, ensured the safety of her team, and upheld the principle that skill, discipline, and preparation were the greatest forms of leadership. The recruits, now fully aware of her capabilities, approached her hesitantly. Questions were asked, technical inquiries, tactical clarifications, requests for insight. Emily responded with patience, clarity, and precision, teaching through example rather than ego. She transformed perception into understanding, mocking ignorance turned into learning, and fear was replaced with respect. Halai observed all of it quietly, absorbing the transformation. Emily's past, her experience, and her calm authority had reshaped the dynamics of the unit. She had shown that leadership didn't always come from rank or volume, but from competence, discipline, and the courage to act decisively when it mattered most. He understood why she had kept her hood, why she had endured mockery, and why she had returned quietly to serve. It was not humility, it was strategy, patience, and wisdom. As night fell, Emily returned to the barracks, exhausted but unshaken. The mission had tested her, yet it had confirmed everything she'd known about herself and the principles she lived by. The other recruits, once mocking and doubtful, now watched her with a mix of admiration and quiet awe. She had faced chaos and prevailed, teaching lessons in skill, patience, and authority without uttering a word louder than necessary. Halle, observing from the edge of the compound, reflected silently. Emily Carter had demonstrated that legends were not built in accolades or recognition, but in the unseen moments where lives depended on precision, discipline, and calm authority. The mission had confirmed it. She was not merely a recruit. She was a force of nature, a living testament to excellence under pressure. And the SEAL commander himself understood that the full scope of her capabilities had only just begun to reveal itself. The quiet of the night settled over the compound, punctuated by distant city sounds. Emily traced the tattoo on her neck lightly, her thoughts momentarily drifting to Mosul, the impossible shots, and the lives saved. She had returned not for glory, but for purpose. And the recruits, the team, and Halle himself had witnessed the power of experience, patience, and calm precision in action. They had once laughed at the tattoo. They had mocked the hood. They had doubted her. But tonight, after the mission, they understood. Emily Carter was more than skill, more than history, more than legend. She was a living force, and her story was far from over. The dawn broke slowly over the SEAL compound, washing the training grounds in soft amber light. Emily Carter stood silently at the edge of the field, hood down, rifle slung across her back. The operation from the previous night had been a success, but the echoes of the mission lingered in the minds of every recruit. They had witnessed skill, composure, and authority that transcended experience. They had watched a legend in action. Commander Marcus Hawley approached her quietly, hands clasped behind his back. The fog of early morning did little to obscure the reverence in his expression. "Carter," he said softly, "I think it's time you understand the impact you've made here." Emily turned to face him, calm, serene, almost unreadable. "Impact?" she asked. Hawley nodded. "Not just on the mission, or the recruits, but on me. On the entire team. You've shown what true mastery looks like: patience, precision, courage, and leadership without ego. The recruits, they've changed. They see a different standard now. A standard they will aspire to, whether you are here or not." Emily's gaze swept over the compound. She saw the new energy, the subtle shifts in posture, the quiet confidence budding among her peers. The recruits were no longer hesitant, mocking, or skeptical. They moved with intent, observing, learning, and internalizing lessons not from commands shouted or accolades given, but from the silent example she had set. Her impact had been quiet but transformative. Hawley continued, his voice low but firm. "You've taught them more in these few days than I could have in months of formal training. You've reminded everyone here what discipline, experience, and quiet authority mean. And you've reminded me why the quiet ones are often the deadliest and most effective." Emily inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the praise but offering no flourish. "I did what was necessary," she said simply. "The mission, the team, that is all that matters." Hawley studied her closely, aware that her humility was not weakness, but a reflection of her understanding of responsibility. She carried her past like a weightless shadow, moving with precision, without boasting, but commanding respect effortlessly. It was rare to see someone who had survived the chaos of war, returned home, and maintained such calm control over themselves and their environment. Emily's presence had reshaped the compound, reshaped the perceptions of everyone who had doubted her, and set a new benchmark for what excellence truly meant. In the days that followed, Emily continued to train with the recruits, but differently. She taught not with lectures, but through demonstration. She allowed them to observe her movements, her calculations, her patience. She corrected quietly, nudged subtly, guided without overt command. Slowly, the once dismissive recruits began to internalize the lessons. Patience, observation, precision, and humility were as crucial as any physical skill. They began to see Emily not just as a peer, but as a mentor, a guide, and an embodiment of excellence under pressure. One evening, after a long day of training exercises, a young recruit approached Emily cautiously. His hands were shaky, but his eyes were earnest. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, thank you for showing us what's possible. I don't think I'll ever underestimate someone like that again." Emily studied him briefly, eyes calm and steady. "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "You learn by observing, by practicing, by making mistakes and correcting them. Respect is earned, not demanded. Remember that." The recruit nodded, inspired, and walked away with a newfound confidence. Hawley observed this interaction from a distance, noting the subtle transformation. Emily's legacy was not in medals, titles, or recognition, but in the effect she had on the people around her. She had instilled lessons that would persist long after she left the compound, shaping the next generation of operators who would carry her influence into missions, battles, and moments where split-second decisions could mean life or death. Later, as the sun set over the compound, Casting long shadows across the training fields, Hale called a final assembly. He addressed the recruits, his voice carrying the weight of experience and respect. "You've witnessed something rare," he said. "You've seen skill, precision, and courage that few ever encounter. What you've learned is not just technique, it's mindset, discipline, and the understanding that true mastery requires calm, patience, and integrity. Emily Carter has set a standard here that will remain long after today." The recruits listened, some nodding, some silent, all deeply affected. They had laughed at her hood, whispered about her tattoo, doubted her abilities, and now they understood. They understood the lessons, the history, and the quiet authority that came from experience forged in fire and tested in real-world scenarios. Emily watched from the side, hood now resting on her shoulders once more. She felt no need for applause or recognition. Her satisfaction came from the knowledge that the team had learned, grown, and shifted in perspective. She had completed her mission, not on the battlefield this time, but in the hearts and minds of those around her. Her legacy was not written in reports or commendations, but in the silent respect and competence of her peers. Hale approached her one final time. "Carter," he said, voice quieter now, almost reflective, "I think it's safe to say the legend of the tattoo, the hood, and the girl they underestimated, it's real. And it's only just begun." Emily inclined her head, her expression calm, yet resolute. "The mission is never over," she replied. "There's always another challenge, another lesson, another life that may depend on what we do next. That is all that matters." As the compound settled into night, Emily traced the tattoo on her neck lightly, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Each line, each coordinate, each shadow of ink was a reminder of survival, precision, and purpose. She had faced mockery, ridicule, and doubt, and emerged not just unbroken, but revered, respected, and undeniably impactful. The recruits, now fully aware of the woman they had once underestimated, moved through the barracks with a new sense of focus and intent. Conversations about strategy, precision, and teamwork carried the influence of Emily Carter's presence. Hale, watching silently from the shadows, knew that the impact of this single operative would ripple through the unit for years to come. Her legacy was not in fame, but in the quiet, indelible mark she left on everyone around her. And in that quiet, unassuming way, Emily Carter had done more than prove herself. She had changed the standard, set the bar, and reminded everyone, veterans and recruits alike, that true excellence is measured not in recognition, but in the calm, precise, and unyielding execution of duty. As the night deepened and the compound grew still, the hooded figure of Emily Carter remained a silent sentinel, her tattooed neck hidden yet symbolic, her presence understated yet undeniable. The laughter, the doubt, the whispers, they were gone. Only respect, admiration, and the knowledge of her unparalleled skill remained. She had earned her place not by words, not by titles, but by action, experience, and unshakable integrity. The legend of the tattoo, the hood, and the girl who had been underestimated would live on not in stories told loudly, but in the silent acknowledgement of those who had witnessed her strength, precision, and quiet authority. Emily Carter's legacy was complete, a soldier, a mentor, a living testament to courage, skill, and the enduring power of calm mastery.